Hi, guys. So, this is the week after Thanksgiving break. And on Monday, I put in a folder, November 30th, with these PDFs. And briefly, I just want to go over the importance of these. I've been grading the papers, and because of circumstances, there's some elements I've overlooked in communicating to you, and I want to start fresh as far as important factors that will impact your grading when you're in college. Okay, this is a college course, and I need to up the scale, so to speak, so that you get a stronger sense of the rigor that's involved with college writing, no matter what your major is. Next semester, likewise, we'll be going beyond the MLA guidelines. So I'll be showing you what's called APA, and I'll also be showing you what's called CM, Chicago Manual. Be that as it may, what I have here are 3 PDFs. Okay, let me show you what I've labeled as the top 10 issues for papers. These are generally typical average situations that I often bump into since I've been teaching 1301. Again, I taught 1301 for over 10 years, since 2004, actually, at various community colleges. And I often see a pattern of situations that develop. Okay, let me make this fill the full screen. Okay, now there are 10 issues that will be shown to you. I'm going to go out of order, so just keep in mind I'm going through the most important, what I view as the more common mistakes that are easily fixed, and then I'll work to the simple, quick ones. So I'm jumping to number 7. Okay, if you see number 7, oftentimes what prevents students from getting an A paper, there's a lack of structure within the paragraphs. Now, what they teach you in high school is a basic understanding of a 3-sentence structure for paragraphs. And that's all fine and good for an average research, high school level research paper. But in college, you are defending your point of view. You're validating the truth you find in your research. And there's a heavy dose of synthesis involved. Because of this, your instructors are going to need to know how you view your evidence as a truth, and how you view your observations as a truth. So what it comes down to, even though you may see a declaration that you've made as an obvious truth, the instructor will want you to defend it and prove without a doubt that what you see as a truth actually is a truth. That's the majority of what's missing in a lot of papers that I see in the 1301 arena. And now that we're moving into heavier argument themes and heavier argument criticism, it's very important that you start increasing your specific defense of your topics, even when you think it's obviously clear what is true about your subject. So let me break down the typical paragraph. Your first sentence, as you know, the first sentence is your topic sentence. It declares the direction you're taking the individual paragraph. That's a given. You've been taught that since 9th grade. Now, what happens is your second sentence, it ought to take the topic declaration and move towards a closer idea of how you are going to declare your opinions and observations on the subject. So as I say here, it confirms the topic. But what it's also doing, it's shifting the topic in a more specific direction, or taking the topic in a more specific area of your discussion. So, for instance, your topic sentence could declare that stem cell research is important despite the controversy. Okay. Then your second sentence would confirm that and would further state that recent medical tests and research has proven that stem cells are not as detrimental, or the collection of stem cells is not as detrimental as once thought in the early 2000s. Okay, so now you can see the direction I'm taking it. I'm moving in a more general, more specific, a less general, more specific direction in an argument to promote the use of stem cell research. So that's the first two sentences. The third sentence, you're going to start analyzing. You're going to start showing why your opinion is vital to your argument. Okay? And then after you establish the beginning point of your analysis, the how and why of your discussion, then you want to show a quote or a paraphrase, specific evidence that backs up your observation, a specific quote from an authority who backs up your viewpoints. You can have a counter argument, meaning you can quote somebody who is on the opposite end of your argument. That's vital. That works. But it's around the middle of the paragraph is my point, where you start utilizing outside resources. This is where the paragraph starts to increase, and it's no longer a simple 3-sentence concept. It becomes a 5-sentence, a 6-sentence, or more concept. The higher you take your education, the bigger your paragraphs become. It's just a fact of the situation, because you're defending the truth of your observations. So again, sentence 4 is a quotation or a paraphrase. You're providing the specific evidence from an authority that backs you up. Now, sentence 5, on the other hand, because you've created a quote, you don't want to just drop a quote in the middle of your paragraph and then move on. You have to prove how the quote works, how the material you've provided backs up your thesis statement in your intro paragraph. Sentence 5 is a vital component of the paragraph, and that's the one I often have heavy discussions with some students, because they keep telling me that the quote is obvious. The quote backs me up. I don't need to defend it. Unfortunately, you have to prove to the instructor that your comprehension of the quote is accurate, and you have to prove how you comprehend, or what you actually see in the quote that makes it a truth to you. Okay, so if I need to clarify that more, just let me know. But at this point, everything you do has to be backed up and defended and validated. The instructor needs to see what you see and how you see the material. And then finally, you want a deductive conclusion, something that wraps it up in a nice little bow. Okay, and that sort of acts as well as a transition to the next paragraph. So when I'm looking at these paragraphs, one of the first things I do, if it looks too small, I count the sentences. If it's 3 sentences, or if it's 4 sentences or less, that's when I get worried. And that's when your score, the point scale, starts affecting your grade. Okay. So If ever I say go more in depth, or if I say I need more details, be more specific, this is where it's hitting the components, the rhetorical backing of your observation is right here. I need more structure within the paragraphs. Some people who like to have exact formulas love the fact I provide number 7, because that I'm giving you the formula. Now, if you are the type of person who likes to build papers off the top of your head, run in any direction you want to, I understand. I empathize. That's how I was. Fortunately, I found ways of manipulating and controlling my writing so the instructor could gain a sense of my defense. Okay. But you got to be very careful if you don't like formulas, if you don't like outlines. In college, the writing becomes very structured and very formulated. So if you want to talk to me more about that on an individual level, just let me know. I'm here for you. Okay. And I do understand, because I hate formulas myself. When I'm writing, I don't want it to sound like a formula. Unfortunately, with academic writing, you have to have a formula. Okay. So that's number 7. Number 8 is a very quick commentary. It's important that you stop using pronouns. And I know that sounds crazy and eccentric, but what it comes down to, pronouns often, let me do it another way. In conversations, pronouns are vital. They help move a conversation along. And oftentimes in conversations, you can infer what the pronoun is modifying or, modifying. However, in academic writing, sometimes pronouns can bog down and destroy your evidence. It's easier if you just simply stop using pronouns. Specifically, you want to avoid what is called a personal pronoun. In academic writing, because it's all research, it's mainly the 5 top non-personal pronouns: he, she, it, they, them. Those are the pronouns you're limited to in a research project: he, she, it, they, and them. So notice what that's taking out of the equation. You don't want to mention yourself. You don't want to mention your audience. Okay? So that's getting rid of I, me, myself, we, our, ourselves, us. Likewise, you, yours, yourself. These clutter up your defense. They make you seem biased. They make you use more emotional wording. Okay? Academic writing is not very creative. There are some instances where it can use a creative bent, but for the most part, with research writing, it's very cut and dry. All it is, you state a truth, you defend the truth, you wrap up why it's important. You move to the next topic. There's little room for creative thought in research writing. The other thing, as far as pronouns, there are what are called demonstrative pronouns, and they can be vague, and they can create lazy habits in writing. Oftentimes, you're probably very familiar with the pronoun it. That situation often pokes up early on in writing, and you'll have teachers saying it over and over and over. What is it? What do you mean by it? They want you to be more specific. So likewise, the pronouns this, that, those, and these are very vague. They can take away emphasis from your subject and create vague communication. So again, you want to be terribly specific with your writing. And that's why I'm saying avoid those pronouns that just sit in the middle of a sentence without having a specific target, an easy target which clarifies your argument. Because in the end, it's all about clarifying an argument. You want to be very clear what your point is. Okay. Now, jumping up to number 1. Synthesis is a main part of academic writing. You are combining 3 trains of thought. You're braiding or you're weaving these concepts in your paper. This is all about your ethos. So if you remember Aristotle and the 3 components he came up with, logos, pathos, and ethos. In college, I've noticed students really don't concentrate hard on their personal ethos. They just want to get the project over and done with. Be that as it may, the stronger your ethos is in a paper, the stronger your grade becomes. Ethos is that ethical component. Ethos as well validates your criticism or the evidence that you are supplying the audience. So because your audience is primarily an instructor, the instructor is going to need where you found your references, why you've chosen a specific reference, and why you feel that person is a valid critic. And it's through this use of synthesis that you increase your ethos. So let me break this down in another way. There are 3 components that are in this section of synthesis. You have evidence from literature. And what I mean there is what you as a reader see in the literature, in the article, in the material, the topic, your discussion. But this is specifically what is stated in the work. Okay. Then you have what is called observational information. These are the observations you pick up and that you infer from the facts, from the evidence that is placed within a story. So let's say in Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart, you have a narrator who's telling the story from the personal I voice. Because he does it from that standpoint and the style that Edgar Allan Poe is using, it's clearly seen early on within the first paragraph, the narrator is not quite healthy. There's something wrong with him. And you can't quite pick it out until maybe the 4th or 5th sentence of that paragraph. By the end of that paragraph, you should know he's crazy. You should know he's insane. You should not have sympathy for that character. So what I'm getting at, that is an observation based off the diction and the tone and the statements that are made within the text itself. Okay, so those are the first 2. The final one is what you research from the critics. So you have the material itself, your observations of the material, and the observations from the critics. You can have opinions about what the critics are saying. So between these 3, you're braiding them together using a 6-sentence structure in your paragraphs, and you're proving that your opinions are a truth. Okay. As I say here, you have to demonstrate how the evidence is working. That's what builds up your ethos. Okay. As I say here, stronger transitions help guide readers through the analysis process. I'm often telling students, build a stronger transition. And you want a cohesive thought running through the beginning to the end of the paper. That is also a component of synthesis. Okay. Number two, avoid the use of questions. Questions result in, as I say here, formulaic or predictable writing patterns. I have had students who often would start a paragraph with a question and then answer it. They start a new question, they answer it. And it becomes almost a cliche when you're reading the material. Although you are following a formula, you don't want the instructor to feel like, oh gosh, here's another formula that I have to read. You want to have it inviting. You want to have it interesting. Okay. In that regard, that's where the creative aspects can be seen in academic writing. So avoid the use of questions. Likewise, avoid what are called fanboys. These are words that typically are used for joining two sentences together. You don't want to open a sentence with a fanboy. Usually a fanboy is used to combine two sentences together, such as and, but, okay, however. So you don't want to begin a sentence with a conjunction. They're often, overall, they're intended to connect phrases and words and clauses together, not used to introduce a sentence. So keep that in mind. Okay. Number 4 sometimes causes students to scratch their heads and look at me like I'm crazy. However, avoid contractions. Your tone of voice changes dramatically the instant you stop using contractions. You want to sound formal. You want your tone and your diction to be very academic. So when you're in that mode of thought, you tend to talk slower. You tend to use longer words. You tend to avoid abbreviations. So in speech, contractions are important. Abbreviations help. Abbreviated thought helps. But in writing, in research academic writing, because you're defending a truth, you want to be very clear your ideas being expressed accurately. And you don't want any misinterpretation on the part of the reader. That's where contractions often hamper interpretation. So, for instance, if you answer the phone and they're asking for your father and he's not home, if you simply say, he can't come, he's outside. That's not formal at all. It's very casual. But let's say a major political character who you admire is calling you and wants to talk to your father. You will be very formal with that person. You won't be casual. You say, my father cannot come to the phone. He is outside busy completing a chore. Okay. You see where I'm going. You're more specific when you're writing. You're very traditional with your writing. You're overly respectful to the reader. So that blurs into number 5, use of colloquial phrases or cliches. Don't use casual everyday speech. The one habit I notice multiple students have is the phrase a lot. I wish it was never invented, frankly. The following words can replace that phrase a lot and convey a stronger sense of your meaning in a sentence. The word a lot is very vague. You want to become very specific with all your details in your writing. So I have some I quickly looked up. There's paramount, maximum, utmost, ultimate, supreme, extreme, much, most, many. So these are not numerically specific. I agree. But, however, the phrase a lot, like I just said, is very vague. However, if I say an extreme number of students overuse the cliche a lot, that's being more specific and more direct towards my point. I mean, again, if you have questions about that, just let me know. Okay, number 6, I'm going to get to at another date. Number 10, I'm going to get to at another date. Number 9. Okay, I'm going to close with number 9. You've been told this so frequently throughout your years in high school. You do not want to end a sentence with a preposition. I hear it all the time wherever I go, and it's like nails on a blackboard right there. That expression, where you at? You'll hear it, especially at airports. It's funny. Someone will get off a plane, they'll pop out their phone, and they're screaming at their friend who's supposed to be picking them up, and they go, "Where you at? Where you at? I'm here." I can't handle it. Anyway, do not end a sentence with a preposition. You're more specific with your sentences, with your evidence, when you close with a noun or the topic, as opposed to those little prepositions. Now, there may come one or two instances where rearranging a sentence is very difficult and it's giving you a headache. If it's one or two sentences within the structure of the whole paper, that's fine. But if you have a bad habit and almost every sentence ends with a preposition, that's when you really need to rethink your writing process. I'll let you know if you have a problem with that, if you need to break a habit. Okay, so those are the top 10 issues. Those are the ones I see all over the place. Any of those will prevent an A paper. On an individual level, I'm saying any one of those causes a paper to move from an A to a mid B or C category. Okay. Now, I'm going to briefly go over the paper without synthesis. What I'm getting at this, I want you to read over this section. On the surface, at a first glance, you may think there's nothing wrong with this example. However, this is an example of a C paper. It's too vague. It does not give specifics. It does not use synthesis. Okay? In particular, what I'll point out to you right now is the thesis statement. Here, I have it in red. We'll be going over in stronger details about the literary lenses. Before Thanksgiving break, I started that conversation. So in a few days, we'll be picking up with the literary critical lenses. But as it is, this is a way of showing a specific direction you're taking a paper. This imaginary student that I'm proposing to you here says they're using a feminist lens, but when you read throughout this text, there is very little evidence that they are actually using a feminist criticism. And there's a danger when you tell an instructor that you're using a lens and then you don't back it up. That's putting your paper, again, like I said, into the C category. So, for instance, this sentence here doesn't tell me anything. It's wanting to establish a point. It's establishing a topic, but it's not giving me the sense of direction that the whole paper will take. And that is the killer of this section. That's the main issue I have here. Notice you have the pronoun it. It becomes obvious. And it's just that the word it is just floating out there. Okay. Avoid pronouns. Avoid specifically the pronoun it. It becomes obvious how much modern culture has changed due to the influence of both Shakespeare's King Lear and the anonymous English poem, The Wife's Lament. So again, this student has only established the topic. He or she has not established a observation about the two literary pieces. It does not show a sense of direction of how the opinion of the reader or the opinion of the writer of the paper, where they're taking that observation. It's very matter of fact, and any two literary pieces, material that you bring together and that you compare for a paper, I mean, it's like saying they're very similar, yet they're very different. You got to take that way beyond that point. You got to give a specific example of how they're very different or how they're very similar. So likewise here, if you're going to tell me King Lear has been an influence on the culture, you got to tell me how it's been an influence on the culture, or why you see that as an important point. Okay, so always remember how and why the answers to those two questions are vital to these academic papers. How does the subject affect the world at large, or why do you see it's an important that the average reader see that these are impacts on the world at large? Okay, to help you along with this synthesis component, I've put out here synthesis sentence stems. When you look at this, the various ideas here are common sense. Once you start reading through them, you'll see how they would apply to any given situation. So depending on where you are in your paper, every paragraph needs to have a sense of synthesis leading it into the next paragraph, just like a transition. So what I have here are 10 different sentence stems that can help you and guide you through your examination of research evidence that builds up your ethos. So the first one is a real easy one. An average reader should understand why X is true, because. So right there, I have the statement, the general statement. I want to say something is true, and now I have to defend why it is true. That's building up synthesis. You can add a critical thought that you've read, or just back it up with another observation you have, but you have to prove without a doubt that this word that the word true is a valid observation on your part. What I've done, each one of these takes it up a notch, so to speak. So, and they can be modified and molded into something different. Number 5 is a good one. The quoted example from X underscores the societal need for change due to and then you fill in the blanks. Another thing to point out, most of these are helping you get to the point where you understand that the clause, the formulation of a clause that starts with the word because, that is essential. After you write a statement down on your paper, look at it and ask yourself, does it need a because? Does it need to be backed up with further information? And more often than not, I would say yes. So again, a short one here, number 6. Such statements from critics prove that X. What number 6 is doing, it's establishing that you see a valid change in society or in the major of your choice that affects society or the world at large. And the critics that you're looking at are in agreement with you, and you see how the industry or the discipline that you are studying is being motivated or is shaping society or the common thought, status quo. Okay. Okay. So again, there's 10 here, so be sure to look those over. Let me know what you think. At this point, let me go back a step. We have not established a new. Okay. There is not an assignment yet for this week. I'm going to do a video concerning MLA citations, which will be a review for you. That's another situation I've noticed that people tend to make the most errors is citing, and that can be a make or break situation for your grades. So that'll be coming up shortly. So otherwise, as I've been saying off and on for the last half hour, if you have any questions, let me know. Just be sure to be safe out there, and I'll talk to you all soon.